All right, welcome back for episode 108 of Freight 360. We got a special one this week, joined by Trey Griggs, and it's another one of our video ones. So not only can you listen on iTunes and everything, but you can watch us on YouTube. So Trey, you're looking dapper today. And
So we are on
we all
video,
wearing
so
the
I
same
have
shirt?
We're all wearing the same shirt.
Oh
and
my
I know that,
God.
wasn't planned, but we literally are all
At
wearing
all.
the same shirt.
I did wear
listen,
a lean shirt because we were having you on, but I didn't know that everyone was going to be wearing the same black one.
I know that's embarrassing, but we do appreciate your business, your partnership. I love working with you guys. So it's fitting, but yeah. And I also didn't know this was video, so I guess I shouldn't be staring out the window or, getting up to go to the bathroom during the show this time.
Yeah, it's all right. Every now and then you mute yourself and play guitar, but no. But hey, it's going to be a good episode. We're going to talk about one of the really crucial things in the U.S. market right now, which is labor and labor shortages. We're going to give that in just a minute. We're going to do a quick sports recap first because the NFL has been insane. But hey, if you're brand new to Freight 360, you've joined our community at a great time when we're growing and lots of great content out there. If you've been with us for a while, welcome back. We appreciate all your listens, all your views, downloads, everything, sharing us, all the questions we're getting from people. We're getting a lot of good feedback. So keep up the love. We appreciate it. Let's get right into sports. Trey, I know you're a Chiefs fan. And last I checked, you're bottom of your division right now. But
we're scraping we're getting a view of the cellar real quick. It's been a long time since we've been in there, so we're just getting a little view of what the Raiders have been
cleaning the cobwebs
the last several years. But no, it's been an interesting start to the season. I think that you looked at the schedule and you saw these juggernaut games at the beginning. Hosting Lamar. Or I'm sorry, going and playing Baltimore at Baltimore against Lamar, hosting Justin Herbert, playing against Cleveland at the beginning of the season. Those are some quality teams that are on the rise. They're trending upward. They have been for the past couple of years. So you kind of knew that was going to be a challenge. But as we were saying earlier, I do believe that the AFC West is a really strong division this year. I think San Diego's legit. I think they're going to be good. They're going to be in the hunt. I think Las Vegas, the Raiders. I think they're going to be better than people think. Derek Carr's got his head on straight, and I think they're going to do pretty well. They've shown some promise. I'm not long-term concerned about the Broncos, but they've even played relatively well here at the beginning in a few games. So it's been an interesting start of the season, and as long as Kansas City gets it all straightened out by November, December, we're in good shape.
I agree. I still think you're going to win your division. Buffalo had a bad start too, but I mean, they came back. Josh Allen looked like Josh Allen this past week. And I think when I look at week 4 coming up this weekend, we're hosting Houston here in Orchard Park, and the spread is like 16.5 points or something like that. And they're talking about it on ESPN today or this week. And they're like, no one really likes to bet on double-digit spreads like that, but that's just the way. I mean, you got a terrible
big
Houston
spread.
team. The Tyrod Taylor's out, so they got some dude who's played like 2 NFL games before up against the Bills
high school
offense
football like last week, and now he's in the uniform play. But it's a fair point. I think Josh Allen's an incredible quarterback, but I'm wondering if the 3-week preseason instead of 4 actually had some sort of impact just to get the gears going a little bit faster. It's just I think it's taken a while for some.
Well, I mean, there was no preseason last year, so it's hard to compare. But I agree. I've heard that a lot.
But you don't know. But either way, it's a good start of the season. Obviously, there's a huge buzz. Stadiums are full. Fans are loving it. The games have been great, so it's been good.
Yeah. Ben, Ryder Cup. Did you watch it?
Absolutely, man.
Shotgun and beers on the tee box.
It was a great weekend for golf. I watched it. Did you watch any of it, Trey? Catch any of it?
I watched everything but Friday pretty much because I was too busy that day working. But I did watch a lot on Saturday and most of it on Sunday. And I had a friend who actually said, "I wish this were closer. This doesn't feel good." And I actually take the other route. Sometimes in sports, it is just as enjoyable watching a dominant performance as it is watching a tight, nail biting performance as well. I reference, Tiger in 97. Everybody was going to win the Masters. They just didn't know by how many, and nobody turned off the TV. Rory winning the U.S. Open by 8. Nobody turned it off, especially when it was 2 months after his collapse with the Masters. Sometimes it is really enjoyable in sport to see a dominant performance.
And I also think that is one of the things that I really appreciate more about golf is because golf, anybody that has played the sport knows that no matter how well you're playing, right, you are one shot away and one thing you might not have done anything wrong. And literally the entire rest of the round can be a disaster, right? Like
a whole
Yeah,
app.
what was the guy's name? Van de Velde from like a decade ago. Remember, he was supposed to win the Open by like 5 strokes, and he literally finished with like an 8 or a 9 or something like that.
3 up on the last hole, and he triple bogeyed to get into a playoff, and had to make a 10-footer to get into that playoff. Yeah.
So I don't know. That's one of the reasons why I always enjoy watching golf, because no matter how much of a lead there is, it always could go back, but they definitely won handily throughout the weekend. So.
Well, the nice thing about that team, which was exciting, is that you saw a different philosophy from Stricker. He actually went after rookies instead of the kind of the purveying thought over the years is you got to have experience to play well in these things. You have to have experience, and he went with like I think 6 rookies, and 4 of his captain's pick were rookies, and they all played well. And it was because they're talented players. They're
really good.
High in the official world golf ranking. They've won tournaments, and they're not afraid. They don't have any scar tissue, and that's an important thing sometimes in sport. It's like Olympians. You see a 17-year-old go out and do something flawless, and then when they're 25, their body may have broken down a little bit, but maybe one of the biggest things is they've fallen more, or they've failed more. They might have some scar tissue. Those guys didn't have any scar tissue, and they just played so well. It was amazing, and it's a bright spot for USA golf moving forward.
Couldn't agree more. I think
go US.
Overall, I also think the US's uniforms were twice that of Europe's. Look terrible.
Significantly better this year. There've been some bad ones. 99 was pretty bad. But these uniforms were actually pretty legit. I thought they were pretty good. So before we move on, I know we're about to move on. One more thing. My St. Louis Cardinals just completed a 17-game winning streak. They lost last night for the first time in like 3 weeks. 17-game winning streak. They're going to get in the wild card. They're hot at the right time. Super excited about that. They were only 5 games away from the new record, but I'm glad they didn't get it, because if they would have gotten it, they would have been on a 22-game winning streak going into a wild card. I just didn't feel good about that.
Did you see
one loss out of the way?
Did you see their playoff odds a month ago versus when they clinched?
I was at a game a month ago.
Dude, it was like 1%.
I mean, it was empty a month ago.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, like Monday night, Tuesday night, doesn't matter. It was packed out both nights. It's cool to see.
That's awesome.
The AL wild card is looking interesting. It's a tight race. Red Sox, Yankees, Toronto. Who else? Seattle's they're right there too. It's going to be interesting. I got wild cards. Tuesday, Wednesday next week, I believe. Right?
Yeah,
that's all right. Yeah.
The last games are actually. It's weird. The last games are all the way into October. Usually they're over by September. So
yeah, they usually finish up. It's the same weekend. It just happens to be later this year. It usually ends Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but it just happens to be that they're played October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd this year. So
yeah.
Interesting. All right, cool. Well, today we're going to talk about labor shortage. I do want to give a shout out to our friends over at DAT first. We're not going to do an ad read for them, but as you guys all know, you can check our episode notes to get a link for a free month of DAT Power, DAT Express, or DAT Trucker's Edge. But the big announcement is we're doing a webinar with DAT on October 12th. That will be at 2 p.m. Eastern, or do the math. If you are, is it 1 o'clock? Did I get that wrong, Ben? Is it 2 o'clock?
I was just going to pull up the time frame because I didn't remember the specific time.
It's on, it's on the 12th.
October 12th. Yeah.
Yeah. We sent out an email to a lot of our listeners earlier today. I think I accidentally wrote 2001 instead of 2021. So just make sure you don't go back in time for it. It's at 1 o'clock Eastern. There it is. 1 o'clock
10 a.m.
Eastern.
Pacific.
Yeah, 10 Pacific, 11 Mountain, noon Central, 1 o'clock Eastern. We're going to go over 5 strategies to get more shippers. That's going to be a great one. And at the end, we'll do a little bonus session with the whole group on some strategies to get some freight out of your customers once you find those shippers. So make sure to register for that. You got a couple weeks to sign up. It'll be available for download afterward too if you can't make it during the actual thing. So check out the link in the show notes to get the registration form. It should be the first thing in there.
I got to see my friends from DAT the past couple of weeks. So we were at McLeod User Conference. They were there. So got to see Melissa Tooley and some of my friends there. And then I got to see Jeff Hopper at the TIA Policy Forum this week up in DC. He was there. I got to talk to him a little bit and had a good.
How was that? I really wished we could have made it up there. Obviously.
Yeah. Well, first of all, shout out to you guys, because in the open board meeting, they talked about the small broker coaching program and referenced the two of you along with our friend Chris Jolly. So you guys are doing a great job with that. And for new brokers out there, great resources with the TIA. They're getting much more creative and much more effective in their offerings and value propositions for their members. So if you're not a member of TIA, look into it. It's worth it. They not only provide incredible resources like these two guys, but also are lobbying on your behalf with Congress. I actually got to experience that for the first time. I had several meetings with congressmen and women up on the Hill, with senators and representatives. Had a chance to talk about some really important legislation that we're trying to get through, some safety selection standards for selecting carriers, as well as international kind of customs for shipments, programs, as well as the PRO Act, which is a really big deal for owner operators, and making sure that they have the freedom to continue to be owner operators, to write their own check for in terms of their schedule and how much they want to make, how often they want to run, and all those types of things. The reasons why people are owner operators, making sure that they still have that by saying no to the pro legislation. So
let me ask you this.
Really
I'm curious on that note. How in tune would you say that the average politician is with the transportation industry? Because I feel like the average Joe
Great
that
question.
I talk to has no idea how the market works.
That's a great question. I think it's obviously heightened now because of what's going on. Obviously, supply chain is the hot topic. No matter where you're at, no matter what bar you walk into, people are probably talking supply chain or some sort of impact that it's having on their business or on just their personal life. So I think it's more now than in the past, but at the same time, I would say that it's not always at the forefront, because when they think about infrastructure, like what they're focused on right now, the infrastructure bill and some of those aspects, they're really thinking about roads and bridges and internet and things that are important, super important. But I don't think they're keen right now on how do we fix this supply chain problem, or what can we do to make it more efficient or make it better. And so that's where, it was really eye-opening to me. We did not actually get to meet with a lot of the senators and congressmen themselves. We met with their legislative assistants, their chief of staff, which they're very knowledgeable. And those are the ones that are actually more into policy than the actual representatives, because they're out trying to get reelected. So it was really neat to see how the whole process worked. But I wouldn't say that it's top of mind. We had to spell out this legislation and what we're trying to accomplish. And it wasn't new legislation. It's something that they've tried to pass twice already, tried to get it into a bill twice already, back in 2017, I believe, and maybe a time before that. And it was in the infrastructure bill that they're looking to pass now, until like a couple of weeks ago when it fell out of committee. Like they pulled it out during committee. And so it's not like it's new legislation, and yet we still had to explain what it is. And it wasn't something that they were familiar with. So it was somewhat concerning. It was fascinating to be a part of the process and to see how it all worked out.
Nice. That's cool. Big stuff. Yeah. I mean, it is supply chain's huge, right? I mean, is it Craig Fuller was on the Today Show?
Yeah, a couple days ago.
Yeah. Talking about, holiday shopping and transportation.
And I'll say this as well. I mean, I definitely want to talk about that, but I would say that it gave me a greater appreciation of what the TIA PAC does in terms of lobbying for our industry, specifically for freight brokers, but also for carriers and shippers who are impacted by the entire supply chain and what's going on, in order to make this a better industry. We talked a lot about insurance costs, how they're through the roof because of nuclear verdicts. And the reason for some of those has to do with the gray area that's created by the FMCSA and some other things that they just haven't quite shored up yet, for one reason or another. And so, they do a great job. And I have a greater respect and appreciation for that now, for the TIA PAC, as well as the TIA in general, and how they, lobby and work on our behalf to make our jobs, our industry much more efficient. So if you're not a part of TIA or, part of the TIA PAC, I would highly recommend looking into it, and checking that out. Jessica Mazzell, you can look for her on LinkedIn. She's the person to talk to about membership. But just a fantastic organization. Ann Rinke's doing a tremendous job recalibrating and leading this organization.
Yeah, she's no stranger to politics. We know that much.
No,
right?
She's not. She's been lobbying and working in government and outside of government, particularly with railroads, but in transportation for a long time. So she's the right person for the job right now.
Awesome. Well, cool. So today, labor shortages. I mean, Trey, I want to let you just kind of take the reins here. This was a topic that you brought up, and I loved it right away when you had the idea. It's been a huge impact overall across the entire U.S. economy, really, but transportation has definitely seen it. So why the idea, in your opinion, to talk labor shortages and staffing and things of that nature?
Well, the main reason is that I've had the chance to go to in-person trade shows the last 2.5 weeks. We went to McLeod. We went to Home Delivery World Conference in Philly. We went to the International Factoring Association in Omaha. And I was just up in DC earlier this week for the TIA Policy Forum. And over and over and over, the common message that I'm hearing from owners and presidents is we can't find good people. People are not showing up for no show, no calls for interviews. can't find people that have experience. People are asking for too much money. I mean, they're looking at entry-level positions and they can't get them for under $20 an hour in some areas more than that, but across the board, $20 an hour before taxes and benefits for an entry-level position for somebody who doesn't show up for the interview. It's very, very challenging, especially in our industry where we're growing. We're seeing an acceleration in terms of the needs in transportation for drivers, for for carrier sales representatives and track and trace specialists, operation type folks. There's such a huge need for that. And over, I just kept hearing, we can't find anybody. And I started thinking about, well, okay, I knew that was true. We know that the government was handing out money for a long time, but they stopped on Labor Day, in that regard. Why isn't this problem somewhat moving in the right direction or trending in a more positive note? Because this was just this week and last week that I'm hearing these things, and maybe it will kind of correct itself over time. But I started thinking about what's causing this issue or what's the underlying problem. And I think the biggest underlying problem kind of goes like this. The people that were most impacted by the pandemic were the low income earners to begin with, the restaurant workers.
A-shaped recovery, right?
Exactly. The people that were already at the bottom were impacted the most. And so they sat out on the sidelines. And of course, when government gives them money, they were basically making what they were making working.
If not more.
If not more. There was no incentive to actually go back out and work. I mean, you go to dinner tonight and you'll see half the tables not filled and they say we're full. We can't, 45-minute wait, and half the tables aren't being used because they can't find workers. It's across the board. And now I think what the government has done by giving those extended benefits was they were trying to artificially bump up what employers were willing to pay because they can't get a higher minimum wage federally. So they're just trying to force the issue and manipulate it in that direction. But what you end up having is people who are demanding, more than the people who are currently working in that job, and they have less skills. So you'd have to bring on somebody who's less skilled in that position, pay them more than you're paying somebody to do it now. And you don't know what kind of worker they are. I mean, there's without making a broad stroke here of generalization, even though it will be, there's a reason why people are at the bottom of the employment chain, if you will. It's usually for lack of employment, lack of responsibility, lack of discipline. There's usually a factor in that regard. Sometimes their fault, sometimes not their fault, but that's usually the reason. So this is the type of employee that's available right now. And it makes it very, very difficult to bring on great talent and not, pay out the wazoo to get it, and not know what kind of result you're going to get. I think if employers knew that these candidates were going to provide great results, that they probably would pay it, but they're not even sure if they're going to get, a responsible employee who's going to show up half the time, who's going to follow policies, who's going to, be a benefit to their company. And they're asking for $20, $25 an hour before benefits and wanting to work from home, and just a lot of things that I think are unattractive right now to employers. It's very difficult. I'm just hearing it across the board.
I think that a lot of that absolutely is also true. I also think there's this other factor in there, right? Like the resettling of America, right? Or it's been called the reshuffling of the United States, where, historically we have been captive to work where we could get to, right? And it's usually been about a 45-minute commute. So for the history of our economy, companies have been able to, in some degree, exploit the fact that people can only work where you could go. So if there were only a couple companies, like they could pay whatever you wanted because what else are you going to do? And I think a lot of that, what we're seeing in the retail side is a lot of the people that were working at, the mall, running the cash register and inventory job that I had, when I was a teenager, like working at Champ Sporting Goods or whatever, those jobs that were paying 14, 15 an hour, right? Like now somebody's able to, and to our industry in general, right? Like you can now work remotely as a freight broker for a company and likely make a lot more than that. You can work a lot of jobs now that you've never been able to from your house. And when you don't have to drive somewhere and people have the choice, like, hey, if I can work from home, and I am that skilled worker, like you said, right? Like say like I am the manager or the assistant manager and I'm on my way up for a retail location. And now I can take more of a, white collar job where I am, using more of my skill, my intellect, as opposed to my physical labor. Like people are taking those jobs. I also think a lot of people are starting their own companies. When you see like the prevalence of like Shopify, making it so much easier for people to start their own small businesses from their homes. They're like, you know what? I don't want to go work for the man anymore. Like I want to be my own boss. I think there was something like a 75% increase last year in small businesses started, like just, licensed new businesses opening. And I think that's a good thing. But anytime you see a transition from the way things were to something new, like there's disruption. And I think when you couple that with what you said, which I think is also absolutely true, on top of the fact that people are still getting sick, and they're calling off. Like, one of my clients, three people in their 15-person company got sick. So they literally couldn't go to work. And they're like, they're trying to, and they're like, hey, like, what do you do? Like, that's still happening. And I mean, to a lesser degree, I don't think people maybe are like taking off entirely, but hey, if you're out for a week or two, and that's happening to millions of people across the country, that's also people that aren't going to work, even if it's for a temporary need. I think all of these things are creating a bigger issue.
Yeah, there certainly are several factors. I mean, that's not what I mentioned was the only one. There's several factors, and it is good that we have people who are becoming more entrepreneurial and starting businesses. I think that's great. You don't see that so much from people at the bottom doing that. You see that from people who are at the top who went, I think I can do this on my own. I think I can do it better on my own. Or I think, it's time for me to have more time at home or family or whatever the reason was. But there's a flip side to this that I think the workers at the bottom don't necessarily appreciate, or even some workers in general, white collar professional workers as well. And that is, this has actually brought in, when you bring in remote work, when you bring in work from home and you bring that in, you also bring in the global workforce.
Yes.
Because
and you've got to compete with that.
If a guy can do it down the street, then who cares if they're in Philippines or Colombia or anywhere else in the world, right? They can still do that job. And so I think long-term, this actually hurts that low-income worker much more than they think it's going to help. They think
100%
$5 an hour to do something simple and not have the skills.
Trey, I had heard somebody say this. It was a company that had put this out in a publication a few weeks ago that said, look, we don't want to automate our warehouse. But if people in our town, and it was a town in the Midwest, so historically their town relied on this manufacturing plant for jobs. And they had said, look, we don't want to automate these jobs away. But if we don't get somebody soon, these will be gone, and they will be gone forever. And for the people that don't have the technical acumen or the comfortable, the ability to work from home on a computer for whatever reason, because they were hourly, labor employees, these jobs may be gone forever, and they may be hurt, on a much longer term scale than I think maybe anyone even realizes.
Yeah, this is going to be a huge shift in the overall market and how people work. And again, I just don't think it's going to play out the way that they think it's going to play out, because there are really talented people everywhere on the planet that now have come into play that weren't there before. I mean, you're still going to have people that have to work in a location doing physical labor. That's always going to be there. But I'm with you. I mean, this is such an incredible shift.
Yeah,
it's going to probably persist for the next, I would say, 24 months. It's going to continue to evolve, and people are, it's just interesting. I think, people like the idea of working from home and having the flexibility. And again, I think companies are going to need to offer that moving forward. But at some point, at the end of the day, the company's going to say, what kind of talent can I get and what price can I get? And I don't care where they are.
Yeah.
So the global workforce is going to be a much bigger impact on the US worker than it has been.
There's a really interesting stat, I think, that also shows this. So I live in South Florida, right? I live where quite a few people come or have come for vacation, right? And typical population growth for Palm Beach County over the past 15 years, 20 years, since about the early 2000s has been about 3 to 6%, somewhere in there. Right now, it's at 11 to 12 and projected to remain that for at least the next 3 to 5 years.
That's insane.
Twice the amount of people are moving down here on a daily and weekly basis. And I mean, it's great. But the other thing is, I think there's a lot of things that also people don't realize, that when you go to work from home, you don't get the interactions with the other people. You don't get to learn from the people around you. And I've always thought that's what I've really liked about what you guys do down in Colombia, is the fact that maybe you're only bringing on 1 or 2 people to your company here, but they're also working in a building with a lot of other people doing the same jobs where they can learn from each other, they can interact. And I think there's a big value to that. And I think that's much harder to do one-on-one through a Zoom than it is when you're surrounded by people doing things that you're learning from.
No doubt. And that's something that's going to be lost, is the walking down the hall and asking a question, collaborative, just spontaneous
water
collaboration.
cooler talk too.
Yep.
Water cooler talk I could do without, because I feel like it's somewhat, you could do that via text and probably get it. But I know what you're saying. It's a relationship. It's a
Yeah, that's true.
relationship.
It
It's
is.
relationship. That's what you miss. And like, one of the, my sales admin that I work with every day on a regular basis, we will literally sit in a Zoom call for an hour as if we're working in an office. We're not even talking the whole time. But
Mhm.
what it does is it provides that instant collaboration, that spontaneous, hey, real quick, we need to do this. I just noticed this. Can we fix that real quick? And we talk about it immediately. You almost have to get creative like that to do that. But there's no doubt that you're going to miss out on that human to human interaction in a physical presence way. That's going to be one of the big casualties of, I think, this whole thing.
And by the way, that is a really great actionable tip that I know Nate and I talk a lot about. I'm a huge advocate of. If you are working from home and you are on a team, you should absolutely be doing these things. You should be sharing like dial time. Even if you're not talking to the other person, having somebody there go through it with you absolutely adds something. It helps you feel like you're not alone. It helps with the isolation. And it also helps you pick up on tips that you're hearing somebody else use. It helps spark thoughts that you maybe not thought of. And I absolutely recommend that if you're out there and you feel like dialing and prospecting is super arduous, do exactly what Trey pointed out, which is spend some time working with somebody else. Even if you guys are doing two separate things, like you don't have to be doing the same thing. Like you pointed out, it's the same thing as in an office. You're just literally sitting next to somebody for an hour or two.
Exactly. Yeah, it gives you a little bit of that back, which is nice, to be able to feel like you are working with somebody, even though you're not in the same room. It's pretty valuable. But
So
all
have
that
you
said, yeah, can you go ahead?
Would you? I was going to ask. So, given this whole discussion we've had, would you guys, with lean specifically, would you attribute any portion of your company's growth on the lean staffing side to exactly what we're talking about here? Hard to hire people in the U.S., so they look for other options like the nearshore model. Is that part of your growth, or do you think a lot of it's just organic from doing a good job?
No, it's both. I mean, but without a doubt, I mean, when I got to lean, which was 15 months ago, roughly, something like that, it was like early in the pandemic, and so we hadn't really, nobody kind of knew what was going to happen. It was still kind of too early, and at that point, I think we had right over 100 customers. Okay, so imagine lean's life cycle of 8 years, they get to 100 customers, and then now fast forward, about 17 months later, and we have 350. So not only have we grown organically in terms of growing existing accounts that have just continued to grow, some of the accounts everybody knows their names, but also bringing on new accounts. And I attribute that to the fact that a lot of owners, like you said earlier, were really about having everybody in the same place, having bodies and seats, and everybody in the office, and accountability and those types of things. And COVID forced them out of that, to where they couldn't even, it wasn't even a choice anymore. They had to let their people work remote, and they had to figure it out. And what they realized, many of them, was that employees can be productive remote. So it kind of opened their eyes to something different. And then when you take that path, when you knock that domino over, it leads to other dominoes of, okay, well, if they can work at their house, 10 miles away, then maybe this nearshoring idea isn't so crazy after all. And so a lot of people that were opposed to it previously for whatever reasons became open to it, to exploring it, or to trying it out, especially if they lost people in the pandemic, not physically lost like death, maybe some, but for the most part, just maybe they downsized their force because they weren't sure how the market was going to react. They cut back, and then they needed to re-add people, and those people maybe weren't available anymore. They just became more open to, well, let's try this. Let's start with 2, let's start with 4 and 6 and see how it goes. And that's been a huge part of our growth as well, is really just kind of being in the right place at the right time. It sounds terrible because obviously it's a pandemic. You hate to see taking advantage of that, but the situation lent itself to owners and CEOs and presidents and founders saying, maybe this isn't so crazy after all. Let's explore it. And it's been really good for us and really good for them.
I wanted to ask you something specifically too about kind of the past year. What would you say is the biggest objection you maybe had pre-pandemic that people, because I think that's really what we're talking about, right? Like there's always resistance to new ideas, to new models. And, like you said, over 7-8 years, got up to 100. The pandemic, you escalated that almost 300%, right? What were some of maybe the objections or some of the resistance you think that was there that you've maybe been able to overcome, or people are now understanding maybe weren't that big of a deal in the first place?
Yeah, without a doubt, it's 2 things: culture and control.
Mm-hmm.
People were afraid of losing their culture if they didn't have people in the office, and they couldn't really control the culture. But the other one was they couldn't, they felt like they would lose control or maybe oversight or accountability or whatever version of that you want to go with. They felt like they were going to lose that. So, what ended up happening again is they were forced out of that and had to find new ways of maintaining culture. They had to find new ways of managing and inspecting what their teams are doing and having oversight and accountability. They were forced into that. And again, once they started to realize, hey, we can maintain a semblance of culture here, we can maintain control because of SaaS-based products that allow people just to log in, and we can have visibility over that. Once I think that part was almost pulled out from their control center in a way, they became open to it. And again, what people don't realize about our offering is that culture is a huge piece of what we do. We want the employees in Colombia to be fully integrated with the US team. That's the only way that the engagement really works, is if they become a part of the team. And so our clients that have fully integrated their Colombian team with their US team, our clients who have made the investment to spend time with them, albeit during COVID, on Zoom calls and getting to know them and their family, and now starting to go back down there and visit, those aspects all play a huge part in the culture. And our the clients that we had pre-pandemic would have said, absolutely, we've kept our culture. It's been great. They would, because that was their experience. But that was a big objection, or a big fear, I think, was losing culture.
So it's funny. I actually, a couple of friends of mine that are in the Western New York area, they work in brokerage as well. And I got together for lunch yesterday with one of them, and he just had to go back to the office after well over a year being at home. And he was a higher producer from home than he was previously in the office. And they now have some people that are remote because they're out of state and they were hired, but they're forcing a guy like him to come back because he's local. And he was like pissed about it. He's like, it's like almost like they don't trust me. And, my numbers showed I performed. Like, why I feel like I'm being punished and being told I have to come back now when we've got lower producers that are working remote just because they don't physically live in Western New York. And what I have to say when it comes to brokerage is, especially with culture, there are successful agent-based companies out there, and a lot of these people, they never meet in person, but because they execute that culture part correctly, that could be a holiday party, award ceremonies, just keeping things not always business all the time when it comes to phone calls, Zoom meetings, email, stuff like that, celebrating birthdays and sharing good news across the organization. You can do that. And it's been successful in a lot of good companies. So the managers and the bosses that think that you've got to have people in the office, it's a control thing. I think there's a character flaw or a leadership flaw in that person at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I would say this culture, another way to look at it, like you just mentioned, is relationships. Culture is built on relationships. It's not built on ping pong tables and snacks or whatever. It's built on relationships. And when you focus on relationships, that becomes your culture. The personalities and the characteristics of your leaders become your culture when it infiltrates other people through relationships. So if you focus on relationships, it doesn't matter where you're at. You can build culture without that. I'll lend one point to that. And Ben, you've been on the show a few more times than Nate has. But the culture we have at Word on the Street is because of relationships. When you go into that environment and you see the openness and the dialogues that we have and the viewpoints that are shared and received and the discussion that goes on, when I meet with you in person, when I met Chris Jolly for the first time, when I see these people, Raquel Paquettes, for the first time, like, there was a culture there. And
there's trust.
Reason the culture was there because there's relationships.
Yep, there's trust.
When you focus on relationships, then you build culture whether you know it or not. And that's why I think we haven't seen that loss of culture, is because the clients who take our best practices and we say, listen, integrate them fully, spend time with them daily, send them some of your swag, come down and visit with them, take them to dinner, do some training on site, do some extra training sessions, let them get to know some of the other people on your team. Like, all those aspects are really about relationships and trust.
Agreed. Well, good stuff. I want to get at some Q&A here before we wrap up the episode, but I did want to ask you, we normally do a lean advertisement. Is there anything fun and new at Lean other than the great conversation we just had talking about your growth from over 100 customers to 300 plus?
Well, it's been a lot of fun, no doubt about it. We've got the best customers. We say that, and we'll say that till the day we die. It's been a lot of fun. But we just launched Lean BPO, which is our newest offering. business process outsourcing. And it's a new aspect that customers have been wanting, especially in some other industries. So it may not pertain as much to some of the jobs in transportation, but it just goes to our growth and where we're headed. So we're very excited about that. We're also excited for, there's a lot of things that are coming up. I mean, hard to believe it or not, but we're starting to prepare for a mastermind event in Vegas again, which is coming up, our big customer, prospect event over Super Bowl weekend. So that's very exciting. And just overall, just the opportunity to see clients starting to come back down to Columbia. We've had a pretty consistent flow of our clients that are now making trips to Columbia. Their situation with COVID is very good right now. It's the new cases and deaths are very low. They've done a great job with that. So getting to see those clients come back and meet with their teams again and do training, all very exciting things right now that's going on.
That's awesome. Awesome. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, cool. So I got 3 questions here today that come from online. The first one here is about van versus van or reefer. So the question is, when should I be posting for a van only instead of a van or reefer? Because obviously, Ben, as we know, a reefer with the reefer unit turned off is just a van, right? So
just a dry van.
And my answer here would be this: if you have a customer that specifically tells you, like, don't put it on a reefer, it's got to be a van, even though you know it, the freight might be able to be moved that way, that's a good time to just post it as a van. Do you have any other examples of it?
Here's the one thing I would say is the way I was taught, and the same thing that I still teach everyone else is when they tell you what the equipment is, you always want to ask and confirm if you can do more or less. So if it's, hey, I want this on a dry van, I'm now in the habit of, okay, can this also go on a reefer? If they're telling me it needs to go on a flatbed, my first question is, can it also go on a step deck? Can it also go on an RGN? Can it also go on a Conestoga? Because one, they don't normally tell you if it can go on other equipment. So you want to ask always to see if you can post up, because that just widens the net to find a truck. And for the same reason this person pointed out, because when you also ask that question, you know why they only want one specific piece of equipment for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I've got to follow up on that real quick. So Ben, I have a question, a follow-up question on that. Do you think it's, and maybe it's a leading question, do you think it's best that they do this on the phone or by email, or does it matter?
So I always lean towards the phone because one, what we were just talking about, it's another opportunity to build rapport, build trust, and another interaction between 2 human beings that furthers the trust. So when at all possible, I try to do this. And plus, when you send it by email, the thing is the written word can be interpreted so many different ways. And I feel you don't have the ability to pivot when you use just text or email. It's way more efficient if you just need to confirm something. But if I can, I almost always lean towards the phone because one, even if you get the wrong answer, you can pivot and turn that. You can't ever do that with an email. So I'm
going to give you my caveat. I love having a rate tendered electronically for paper trail, right?
Oh,
if
yeah.
somebody at a shipper says, yeah, this can go on a step deck, and then you realize it's too long or whatever the case might be, and then the customer's got an issue with it, and they could just say, oh, we told you it had to go on a flatbed. And it's like, well, no, I had this email from that new hire that you improperly trained or didn't know what he was talking about that told me I could put it on a step deck. So that's my caveat is if it could come down to covering 100%. Your ass, have it electronically.
Always have a written record of anything that is said verbally is my caveat. Like I always do that, but I'm also going to send the email and go, hey, you can confirm. Yeah.
You could just email them after the call and say, hey, just wanted to verify.
Yep.
We're throwing this on.
That's the best practice right there. Absolutely.
Yep. CYA when at all possible.
All right, good. Next question is, should my comp plan change after an annual review for a freight broker? So if you run your own brokerage, no. Your gross profit's going to go up because you're making, if you're doing better, but you're not going to give yourself an annual review. Essentially, if you're an agent, you're not going to get an annual review. But if you're W-2 and you legit have like 3 month, 6 month, 12 month, whatever, I don't know. I mean, I've talked to folks that they strongly believe in if you're commission based, if you want to make more money, you got to make more sales. Now, if you have a base salary tied to that, I'm all for like periodic increases to stay up with cost of living. Otherwise, it's essentially you're losing money every year. But I don't know. Do you guys think you should, as a freight broker, W-2, should you get an increase in pay as a commissioned salesperson after a review? Should that happen?
I walked through a client doing this yesterday, actually. So it was a smaller brokerage, not a larger one. The larger ones, I wouldn't expect that unless exactly what Nate pointed out, it's a salary. I will say the smaller brokerages have the ability to be able to be a little more creative with their commission splits. And the particular example was this agent, or actually it wasn't an agent, it was an employee of a brokerage, was learning a new niche in the business. So they didn't know anything about it, right? So like, we'll just say for the example, it was intermodal, right? So they were going to start out at a smaller commission split. And as their responsibilities grew and they understood what to do, the manager's need was going to decrease and then their percentage would go up. So for example, they were going to start out 15% because they literally didn't know anything. And then as they became more proficient, it was going to go to 20 and then to 25. And then it was going to finally be 30 when they no longer needed basically somebody looking over their shoulder and making sure everything was done correctly.
Yeah. And the last thing out there too, and Trey, I think we talked about this with you in the past, is a compensation plan is not just your paycheck, right? It goes way beyond that. This could be, for example, the ability to work remote, like we just talked about, having flexibility on how many days you're in the office versus at home, or the hours that you work, or whatever. I think there's a lot of different ways to adjust the compensation plan other than just increasing the salary on it. So
back in the day, that was the biggest carrot at TQL, to be honest. Like right when I started and before I was there, I don't even know if that's still there anymore, obviously, but like there was a goal and I think it was like 20K a week or 80K a month. When you hit that at GP, you could work 2 days from home and 3 days in the office. And that was like always everybody's goal, was basically to kind of get that freedom. To Trey's point, right? It's not always just money. It usually isn't just money.
And not only that, but I think that there is also kind of a caveat with that as well. And that is you really have to know your people on an individual basis. That's important. But two is, I always look at it this way. The base salary to me is your value to the company. Your commission is your opportunity in the company. And it's always based on how you want to incentivize people, right? So
it's a great point.
When you have commission in play or bonuses in play, you're telling somebody, if you do this, I will pay you this. And so there's a condition, right, with that. The base salary, there's no condition to that. You're an employee. This is your value to us. This is your base. And so, I look at an employee that in this situation, every situation is unique. Does this employee help other teammates become better? Does this employee stay longer to get work done? Does this employee ask good questions and try to grow and learn? Like there's more to it than just you've been here a year, right? That's the easy way to do it. So to me, if you're looking at, should my comp plan change? Well, what kind of employee are you? What kind of argument could you make that, listen, I know that everybody else's base is X, but I think mine should be Y, because not only am I hitting my targets, but I'm helping them hit theirs as a great teammate. Let me tell you exactly how that works. Like, I think there's more to it than that. So when I look at compensation, base salary to me is the value that you're bringing to the organization as an employee, and your commission is your opportunity based on what I want you to do.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I'll add there too is I've had people ask, like, if I want to raise, and I've seen this happen, like, should I just go to my boss's office and ask for one? And I'm not a fan of that. I feel like you put your manager in a very defensive position where whether they say yes or no or anything in between, like, it's just not handled the right way. I always like the idea of some sort of a growth plan, like, hey, let's say you want to make $25,000 more next year. Well, you already know that if you have a commission base, or if you have a commission percentage off your sales, you should be asking or talking to your supervisor on how do you feel like I better apply myself to reach these numbers to hit this goal? Or, how can I provide more value to the company that my base salary would be X, right? There's different, instead of just like, hey, can I have $3 more an hour? And it's like, what?
I'd like to let me double up on that real quick, because I agree exactly with what you say. If you come with a plan, if you say, here's my personal goal, I would like to make this, what can I do, or help me get to that place? So this year I made $100,000. I'd like to be at 140 next year. One, is that possible here? Just be honest with me. Can I do that here? And two, if so, can you help me figure out how? Like, what do I need to change? So how many more calls do I need to make? Or how can I get better with upselling or rehashing or whatever it might be? How can I improve or grow my skills to get there? Will you help me do that? I guarantee you that a good sales leader worth their salt would be happy to field that question.
Yeah.
And help somebody get there.
Yep.
I view anybody in leadership, and I'll say this, anybody in leadership, their job is to help everybody that reports to them be successful. They work for their people, not the other way around. So if somebody comes to me and says, this is my goal, I really want to get there, it would be cruel for me to say, yeah, you can get there if it A, is not true, or
Yep.
B, if I don't know how to help you get there. But if it is possible and I know how to help you get there, I'm going to welcome that conversation, and if I can't, as a company, if I can't help one of my guys get to where they want to go, then they should look for another opportunity. And I should be okay with that, because I can't help them get where they want to go. They have a goal. So again, I think those conversations are great to have, and to come with it as, I'm here today, I really want to get there by next year or whenever that time is. Can I do that here? Can you help me do that? That's a welcome conversation.
Absolutely. 1,000%. All right. Last question here. How do I respond to my customer that is asking me for rates for next year? Well, I think that's my down and dirty answer to this is try to give them a little bit of knowledge or education, if they don't already have it, on how crazy the market has been in the last year and how unpredictable your rates will likely be if you try to forecast them for a year out. That's why we've seen more micro and mini bids lately instead of these quarterly and annual bids. But Ben, any thoughts on?
It's the same. Yeah. I mean, even the largest shippers aren't running full bids for the very same reason. Nobody knows where the market's going to be next week, let alone next year. I think you phrase it perfectly. If somebody genuinely is asking for this, you don't want to make them feel like they're asking for something that may be ridiculous, to be honest. So you want to have that in a way that sounds productive. Like, hey, look, obviously COVID has, and everything has transitioned a lot of things in directions nobody could predict. We are still in the midst of it. And to be honest, even if I could, I don't know that any carrier is ever going to give you a rate that they'll be able to basically hold that far into the future anyway.
Exactly.
They're not really worth anything, even if you give them, is the point.
That's it. Well, hey, awesome episode, Trey. Always great having you on. We're going to get you on again, hopefully this fall or later this fall. It's already fall. Holy cow. But any final thoughts?
Hey,
you guys are playing in Philly this weekend. Is that what it is?
Well,
Chiefs?
first of all, you guys look great. If I haven't said that yet, you look great. All right.
The polos.
I'm hopeful that at some point I'm going to get a little Freight 360 polo in the mail as well. Maybe
I'm about to order some, so I'll get you one. Don't you?
We got to order some swag.
Yeah. Send me a small. That's right. No, but you guys look great. It's always good to be here. And again, kudos to you guys for what you guys are doing, not only with the training resources that you have, the resources you're providing online, your podcast, which is great. I'm just so honored to be here. And of course, the work you're doing with TIA. It's great to see you guys thriving and doing great things. So that's good. Now, on the sporting note, two things. First of all, hoping the Chiefs get a great win this week. And I think it was pretty funny. So Andy Reid, coach of the Chiefs, for those that don't know, he used to be the coach for the Eagles. He won 100 games, or he's going to win 100 games at both teams. If he wins this week, it'll be his 100th win as a Chief. And the joke is he's been saving it up. he's intentionally lost the last 2 weeks so he can do it in Philly and really make a great news story. So excited about that. And again, I think the Chiefs are, you get beat once. Okay. You get beat twice at home. I think they're going to be pretty fired up this week.
Oh yeah.
We'll
I agree with you.
Second.
And your Steelers. Oh, wait, okay. Never mind. We're not going to talk about the Steelers because they're terrible. But all right, Trey, back to you.
Their only win this year were against the Bills, so keep that in mind.
True.
They started hot and then just downhill from there. Second thing is super excited to see our brand ambassadors Jared Wolf and Camila Villegas teeing it up this week down in Mississippi at the Sanderson Farms Championship. So if you're hearing this on Friday, check it out on Saturday and Sunday. Hopefully they both make the cut and get some TV time if they're towards the top of the leaderboard, and look for that Lean Solutions logo on both of their.
Did Jared get his card for next year?
He did. Yeah, he got.
That's what I thought.
Ago. Yeah, so this is his second tournament. First tournament, he didn't play well. And by the way, you guys should check out the new podcast that we created for Jared. It's called the Full Sin Podcast, full_sin_pod on Twitter and Instagram. And what we're doing is every week he's like recapping his tournament week from an insider's perspective of what
that's
it's like
awesome.
As a professional. So he talked about what that first week was like out in Napa. He didn't play well, but he it's really cool to hear him talk about how he processes a bad week, what he learned. And he's a historically slow starter, he's somebody that starts a little slow and just keeps learning and growing and just keeps trending up. That's been his career. So it was great to hear him talk about, the difference between a PGA Tour course setup and a Korn Ferry Tour course setup, and what he learned, what he needed to work on during the off week with the Ryder Cup. It's great. So we got 3 episodes out. It's at anywhere you find your podcast, Apple, Spotify, or wherever. It's just a quick 30-minute conversation each week where he gets to talk about his experience inside the ropes as a PGA Tour player. Really fascinating conversations. But yeah, so they're both out this week, and it'll be great to see them playing well.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to give my prediction on the Bills. Bills hosting Houston. They're not going to make it into the end zone in Orchard Park. Houston, that is. I'm going to give Houston 6 points, and the Bills are going to going 31-6 Buffalo. Ben, you guys are playing in Green Bay, I think, right, on Sunday?
No.
Something like that.
No, I think we're playing the Raiders, aren't we?
Let me look here.
That was 2 weeks ago. I honestly don't remember.
NFL schedule.
Obviously not a super fan of your own team. That's
Well, I also turned the game off towards the end of the fourth quarter after watching last week.
That's funny.
Pittsburgh. Oh, that's the Bills schedule. I don't know. I thought it was Green Bay. I don't have it in front of me. I keep loading the Bills schedule up here. Oh, it is Packers. There it is. And it says 4:25 on Sunday. So playing man bun, Aaron Rodgers.
I wonder what the over and under is.
Ben, any final thoughts?
Whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right.
And until next time, go Bills.